Welcome to Sporting KC President Jake Reid. Honor and a privilege to have you on the show. Welcome.
It's great to be here. Excited for it. Thanks, guys.
As somebody who is intimately connected with the soccer community in Kansas City, we have the World Cup coming. How excited are you?
I don't know how you can have a bigger year for soccer. I think I've been working on the World Cup, since 16 is when I started the initial bid process. So I'm excited. This has been a labor of love for many years, and to see it come to fruition will be fantastic this summer.
Sorry, Rob. We've had a number of people say on this podcast that this whole process started in 2015, 2016. Was anybody sitting around the table saying, this is the craziest idea I've ever heard in my life? This is never going to happen?
Yeah, I mean, it was probably Kathy Nelson and I were the OGs back in the day, probably looking at each other saying, this is a long shot at best, but we got to do it. And I think it didn't really feel real until we got through, probably 18, 19 and started to be like, okay, we might actually have a shot here.
You mentioned that. I was curious, what was your specific role in the bid process? Because we've had Kathy Nelson on the podcast. We've had a lot of the movers and shakers on the podcast, and they all kind of give different timelines. You said 2016. What is your role in that process? And is it as simple as ownership comes to you and says, hey, the World Cup could be here, or what's just that process and what's your role?
Yeah, I'll try to give a brief backstory. So when I started in 2010, one of the first events I remember going to, there was an old watch party, like somewhere down in the plaza. And at that time, we were going for the World Cup. I think they were submitting it was for the 18 and 22 bids, which would have been Russia and Qatar. And we didn't get it as the United States. And I was at that party, and it was like the culmination of like the U.S. is going to get it. And it was like you could hear a pin drop. And so it was devastating. And so fast forward, when we started talking about this, our goal was like, we can't let that happen again, right? Like, and I think the U.S., we felt like we got robbed in 22, did the joint bid. And so I think it was, my role was, fairly simple early on. Like, we had the soccer connections. We knew FIFA well. We knew U.S. soccer really well. And so how do we kind of leverage those relationships to make sure that we have a legitimate seat at the table? Kathy does what she does, which is she puts a great bid together. And I think our two teams really worked very well on combining the soccer political, how do we make sure we're out front side with we know how to run a bid and galvanize the city.
You mentioned that 2010 party. I didn't know that 2010 party existed, honestly. First I'm hearing about it. So compare that, party's a poor term because it was a bad time,
funeral,
versus the versus the 2022 Power and Light event. Like, was it the same cast of characters at both parties, or did you learn from 2010, okay, we got to tie in the Royals, the Chiefs, we got to get more people involved? Because I imagine what happened in 2010 and 22 are startlingly different events.
Yeah, really different. And I wasn't involved in the 2010 one other than the aforementioned
funeral.
But there was not as many people involved, right? And I think you got to this one, and yeah, I think early on it was really important. Like, we need this to be a entire city, entire region, more importantly, event. And so I think that 22 was, that was the opposite of the 2010, right? That was pure joy. And people always ask, like, when did you guys know? We didn't know. And I always say there's a video of like Clark and Cliff, and I'm like the tall guy lingering behind them. If you watch that video, like the celebration from those two, it's like Clark celebrates more than they won the Super Bowl. It was pure surprise, joy. There's no way that could have been replicated other than like we found out when everyone else did at the same moment.
Well, I think for Clark Hunt, Mr. Hunt, this had a lot more to do with his father than it did with him. And I knew briefly Lamar Hunt, from when the KC Wizards started. He was enthralled with soccer. I remember interviewing him one time, and he would not stop talking about his love for soccer. And I think for Clark Hunt, this was really the culmination of a dream for his father, more than it was for him.
Yeah, without a doubt. We talked a lot about the legacy, what this would mean to Lamar. And listen, for those who aren't aware, Lamar was one of the founders of our league. He was one of the guys that owned, I think, 3 or 4 teams early on, including the Kansas City franchise,
Columbus
which is
Crew.
Yeah, Dallas was in there. Mm-hmm. And so that was his, I want to say his passion. Obviously, he had a fairly good amount to do with the NFL as well. But soccer, he loved. And I think Clark tells the story. I think he went to he's been to all but one World Cup with his dad. And so, yeah, family and the legacy of the Hunts was a major discussion throughout this process.
Well, you're younger than I am, and Rob, so are you. But I can distinctly remember the 1994 World Cup here in the United States. And it captivated the country. And from that 1994 World Cup came MLS in 1996. And I believe there were 10 teams in the beginning.
Yep.
What does this World Cup, do you portend, mean for MLS?
Yeah, it's a great point, and we've talked about this a lot. I think if you look at where the league is now, it wasn't anywhere then, but I think 30 teams, healthy franchises, great fan base, energetic support. This should be like the rocket fuel, just throwing it on top, right? And so I think World Cup always drives in casual fans. We always see an uptick in broadcast and interest. How do you capture it with the country actually putting it on and it being here? I think it's hard to overestimate like how important this will be for the sport.
One of the things that MLS has struggled with, I think, and I'd love to hear you weigh in on this, is they get some of the big superstar players, but they get them late in their career. A Beckham, a Messi. The fact that the spotlight is going to be on the United States and in many regards on Kansas City, does this mean that some of the bigger internet, or do you see where some of the bigger international players are going to start giving MLS another look?
We hope so. That's one of the objectives we talk about at the league level is how do we get some of these international, the top 200 players in the world to stay here in the country, including our domestic players, right? I think that's another challenge is a lot of our national league players are not on Major League Soccer rosters. I think the league's getting better. You look at the DPs, it's getting younger over the years, but I think a couple of things. World Cup this summer, we're changing the schedule next summer to be aligned with the global calendar. So that means for those casual fans, we'll start in the summer. So late July, and our season will run through and end in May. I think the opportunity with World Cup on the player side is how do you attract that talent here and get them into MLS versus exporting it back overseas.
You mentioned the MLS. You guys are in a little bit of a unique position compared to like the other sports. You're going to have a pause in the middle of your season for a world tournament. I guess this is more of a two-part question. How do you handle that with mid-season? You just stop. And then is that mid-season stop one of the reasons you did move to the winter calendar, as you alluded to?
It's definitely one of the reasons. I'll answer the questions in reverse order. So I think if you look at the summer, it's either World Cup, it's Gold Cup, it's, some CONCACAF competition, it's the Euros. There's always something. So the World Cup is clearly the biggest, but every summer is so packed with soccer. It's a huge challenge. And I think with the schedule change, getting away from that makes it easier. Also, player transfers, again, we're getting in the weeds here on soccer talk.
Well, that's what we do.
The biggest window is the summer, right? And I shouldn't say the biggest. The easiest globally to move players is the summer. And so for us, think of our schedule, right? We're about to start right now. We're in the winter window. We're trying to get some guys in. We either have to get them out of their contract early, because even if they're out in the summer, we got to buy them out, or you're waiting till the summer to either import and then get them aligned with your roster, or if I'm trying to sell a guy, right? So then it comes down to, do I sell, a player who's good and is going to hurt my playoff run, or do I keep him and then by the winter I'm going to lose the ability to sell him? So I think that eliminates a lot of those challenges. As it relates to the World Cup this year, I think we break for 53 days as a league. So it's a lot. It'll be a challenge for the team, for the staff. I think we'll basically run another preseason warm-up as we get into the summer, as we build out of World Cup. But I think that's part of the challenge and probably why we're switching. But I think we've got a good plan for how to deal with it as it relates to this summer specifically.
And we can dive deeper into this. I know Argentina is training at Compass and England is training at Swope, but it's not just the 53 stop for you guys because Kansas City's a host city.
Yeah.
Do you guys have to abandon your facilities and just, hey, you train at I don't know how that works because 53 days off, but if you're Charlotte, for example, picking a different team, you could still train and be doing stuff in that 53 days. You guys don't have either your training facilities or potentially your stadium for that hiatus.
Yeah, we're going to train at Swope, which is not probably likely now. Yeah, I think so. The legal break for 18 days. So I think the last weekend match is May 23rd, if I got my dates right. And so the league will mandate 18 days off, and then teams will come back to start training. And so, yeah, we're working through what that looks like. We'll probably go somewhere outside of Kansas City for that first, call it 2 weeks back, just to kind of get reacclimated as a team, and then we'll come back and we'll want to train in town for the kind of the build up to, I think St. Louis is our first match coming out of
World
of course. Cup. So just why not just throw the biggest rival in there as your first game back. So I think for us we're trying to figure out where's that going to be. We've got a couple good options. We don't have anything finalized yet. I mean, part of the England deal when it came up was, I talked to the ownership and I was like, I don't know how we don't do this, and they're like, we agree. Like if we can get England, we got to do it. But yeah, puts us in a little bit of a bind as we figure out where we're going to train.
At Compass Minerals Park, I coached youth soccer for 20 years. I've coached out there more times than I care to count. That's artificial turf.
Yep.
Do you have to change anything out there?
No. So for Argentina, they'll train on where we train as a first team, which we have 3 full grass pitches there. So they'll be there. So the place you're at is the Fields complex, which they will not be at.
So it's a different complex.
Separate complex. Yep.
Got it. What about security?
We're going to need a lot of it.
I mean, you're talking about arguably the most famous soccer player in the history of soccer training right next to Providence Medical Center at Compass Minerals.
Yeah.
People are going to be clawing to get a look at him, to watch him practice. Security has to be through the roof.
Yeah, it will be. I've learned a lot through this process that I probably didn't think about. So when we were touring the facility early on with a lot of these clubs, even England, who saw our place at Compass as well. Like if you've been out there on our pitches, behind them there's scrim, fence, and then there's trees like woods, and they're like, the woods are a problem. Like, the woods are a problem? They're like, we will have people climbing trees trying to take pictures of training, and we're like, okay, well, so yes, we've had to think about a lot more than just when Sporting's out there training today at 10:30. We've got a good plan, both, internal security, working with the host countries, working with the local and state authorities. So we'll have a very robust plan, but it's going to be a lot. And when you add in all the region needs of all the teams coming in, not only base camps, but then clubs coming in to play matches here as well, it'll be well secured all around.
You mentioned
You're very careful not to give away many secrets.
Yeah.
You mentioned England touring it, and obviously Argentina is going to train at Compass. What's that process like? Because I imagine, is it similar or different to the process of getting matches in Kansas City to sell your 2 training facilities to, hey, you're going to be training here full time?
Yeah, I mean, one, I would just say for the region, it's incredible, right? And Netherlands has been announced as well, and then not official, but Algeria has largely been rumored to go to KU, and so we'll wait and see how that plays out. But yeah, I think, listen, England was probably the most engaged for the entire process here. They've been out probably, their first visit was probably 14 months ago. Wow. So they've come out, they wanted to be here. They loved Kansas City. Obviously Argentina came in late after the draw, given where they're playing, and decided to make this their home. There's the nuance on, all those are in pod 1 of kind of the top tier countries. Netherlands plays here. They had priority over England since they don't, even though England has the higher ranking. So they went to the current. England was on the outside looking in and called us and said, hey, can we see your second team facility? We'd like to look at it. And that's how you get 3 top 7 teams in the world in Kansas City.
What role, if any, does Sporting Park play in the World Cup?
Yep.
Will any teams be practicing there, maybe a scrimmage or something, or is Sporting Park going to basically be empty for 50 days?
Yeah, a couple things. So it will be a training center for visiting teams. So when teams are coming in to play here, that will be one of the sites that they train. So whether that's, I'm trying to think, who's Austria is not in market, right? If Austria comes in, needs a training center, they'll train at the stadium as one of their locations as the build up to the games. At Arrowhead, we are trying to secure a friendly with one of the teams in town, hopefully as kind of a warm-up build-in match, which would be, I think, fantastic. And then we'll announce sometime in the next couple of weeks, we're working on a watch party plan out there to kind of be in conjunction with the Fan Fest downtown. We'll probably do the off days at our facility. So you'll probably have, I don't know, a dozen-ish dates where we'll do kind of big watch parties at the stadium as well.
You mentioned Compass. I want to go back a little bit here, thinking about the process. You mentioned 2010, the funeral, and obviously the process. When you guys built Compass, was it part of the plan of building it of, hey, we're going to create a top-of-the-line training facility, not only just for the United States, but for anyone, with the idea of maybe if we get a World Cup, this can be part of a plan to attract a team, maybe not only just to train here, but play games here? Was that part of the longer vision, or is that just, hey, we wanted a top-of-the-line facility available?
Yeah, I mean, I could say yes and sound really smart that we had that foresight. The real answer is we wanted it to be best in class. We wanted to make sure that the national team, as in the U.S. national team, not just the men's, but the women's have been here a bunch. The youth national teams have trained here, that it was a go-to destination. And then for us, when we had, if it was a big team or club or country in town, we wanted to be a showcase. The real reason we wanted it to be a home base was, listen, when you have our sport, we're competing globally, right? I always joke, the Chiefs are not that concerned with Mahomes going to Germany to play. Like, I don't think that what keeps Clark Hunt and Mark up at night is we might lose Mahomes to Europe. We do, like our guys can, right? So vice versa, when the guys are coming in, all they know is New York, LA, probably Miami. when they're coming here, agents are coming in, players are coming in. We want them to leave and be like, you guys will not believe what is in this place called Kansas City. And so for us, it was as much of a recruiting tool. And I think for the World Cup, that's what we're going to try to use it for, right? I mean, you're going to have Argentina here. You're going to have a bunch of countries coming through. How do we showcase that? So when those players go back to their home clubs, they're talking about it. And that's really what I think our goal should be coming out of World Cup.
You mentioned keeps Clark Hunt up at night. We ask this question of everyone who comes in. What keeps you up at night?
I mean, probably all the things we just talked about. I mean, I think World Cup's fantastic. There's a lot to do right now.
Are you nervous?
No, I'm excited, and also it's like I always say, it's like opening a stadium. It's one of the most exciting things you're ever going to do, and then you're probably going to be very relieved when you get through it. So I think for me, it's how do we take advantage? How do we leverage it as a club? I think that's the real trick for us. Is it will be amazing. People will come. It'll be an amazing showcase. How, with my sporting hat on, do we make sure that we leverage it after the fact for those fans that are coming? And not just international fans, but fans from the region, right? Whether it's Iowa, Nebraska, Oklahoma, all over the Midwest are going to come in. When they leave, how do we get them hooked and say our go-to pro team is Sporting Kansas City? That's what we're trying to solve right now.
Let me ask you about a rumor that surfaced about 3 years ago, and you can confirm or deny. How close did Sporting Kansas City come to landing Cristiano Ronaldo?
I had a feeling that was going to be the question. Hard to say how close. It was very real, though. I mean, we had multiple discussions with his agent. We had real numbers on the table. And so it was real. How real? It's hard for me to give you it was at the 1 yard line, but ultimately the Saudis came in and they offered a lot more than we could.
What would that have meant if Sporting had landed Ronaldo?
Yeah, we look back and we've talked about this internally now. So this was pre-Messi, right? Just to set the table for those listening. We'd run a lot of numbers on what we thought the impact would be. I would tell you now, seeing what has happened with Messi, and I'm not saying it would have been the same, but we were underestimating, I think, the impact of one of those guys in our league. And so I think it would have been an unbelievable moment for not just the sport, but certainly I think our franchise. It would have put us on a much different global stage, without a doubt.
You mentioned Messi, and I'm going to connect a few dots here. He obviously, when he was with Miami the first time they came to Kansas City, they played at Arrowhead. What's the collaboration been like between Sporting, the Royals, and the Chiefs? Because this is a bid process with the World Cup that's not just, hey, Sporting Kansas City wants the World Cup. We're going to play games at what used to be Children's Mercy, but now Sporting Park. Like, how do you collaborate with all three? And then, obviously, there's some connection there because you have the World Cup, and obviously, Lionel Messi played his first game against Sporting Kansas City at Arrowhead.
Yeah. One, amazing. And I'd start with a shout out to the Royals because they're not directly impacted by this in terms of a positive, right? Like we are at soccer. We're going to, there's an aura that should help the sport. The Chiefs are hosting at their venue. The Royals have been unbelievable partners for someone who really could have just sat on the sideline and done nothing. But I give credit to their ownership and John, and they've really stepped up in a huge way. So they deserve a lot of credit that they probably aren't getting. And then the Chiefs have been engaged, I mean, literally since day one on this, right? It's their venue. We talked about the legacy piece and kind of the Hunt family. So they've been amazing. I mean, listen, there's a lot that has to change. It has changed at this point at Arrowhead to make this happen. And so they've been fantastic along the way. And listen, for them, I give them credit. Like the summers have been dead. We haven't had a lot of big concerts out there. Everyone just assumes it's all gravy. There's a lot of sacrifice that they've had to make in terms of how they operate their business, and they've been fantastic throughout the process.
Like you, I'm assuming you were there for the Arrowhead Messi game.
Yep.
And I was there as well. I took my kids. I'm like, we have to go see Lionel Messi. We bought some extra tickets, and I'll never forget the morning after the Messi game at Arrowhead. I flew to Cancun with my girlfriend, and I went to the bar to get a couple bottles of water, and I heard the bartender and a customer arguing who was the better player, Lionel Messi or Ronaldo. And I'll never forget, I said, I can answer that question for you. Messi is the better player. I saw him last night. And the customer at the bar turns to me and goes, and where did one see Lionel Messi? And I said, I saw him in Kansas City, Missouri last night about 18 hours ago. And he looks at me and he says, you saw Lionel Messi in Kansas City, Missouri. I said, yes, and he scored a goal. And it was brilliant. What is the impact on this one player to your league?
Yeah, I think he's a once-in-a-lifetime guy, right? I think him and Ronaldo, that's the classic debate, but I think what's hard to debate is that those are two of the greatest you will ever see.
Two of the three greatest.
Yeah, and so I think when we were able to get him into the league, get him in Miami. I'll talk about that game as a good lead into the question, right? So 72,000 ended up being at that match. We've got roughly 19,000 at our stadium. It was a big gamble for us, right? We knew it could do well, but we kind of thought, hey, if we get to 60, 65,000, this is going to be a massive game, right? So we go on sale with the pre-sale for season ticket members. Usually you would do, a small percent. But we thought, hey, if we can get another couple thousand of season ticket members, this is a great start. We're in a meeting, unrelated to this. Our ticket guy comes up. He's like, hey man, we've been on sale for 15 minutes. I was like, how are we doing? He's like, we've sold 4,000. I was like, 4,000? So immediately I was like, this is going to be a different ball game. So I just think I always give the example, like my dad, he probably doesn't know who Mbappe is, who's probably a better player at this point globally, right? My dad knows who Messi is. And so I think he crosses over this casual fandom into he's in a different sphere. And I think to have him in the league, to have him, be so out front and still playing at a very high level has been hard to fab. And listen, I was in Greece 2 years ago with my wife for her 40th. The only MLS jersey I saw walking around Greece multiple times was a pink Lionel Messi Miami jersey. So, I mean, he's transcended not just our country, but he's, clearly still very relevant globally.
Who's the best, Ronaldo or Messi?
Oh, Messi. I agree.
Okay.
Do you feel that way when you were meeting with Ronaldo's people?
At that point, definitely Ronaldo.
Ronaldo's number one.
Without a doubt, it was Ronaldo at that point.
At that point, the answer had changed pretty significantly.
Yeah.
What's the impact going to be on this town?
I think when we talk about it, I think it's hard for people to fathom what's coming on our doorstep here in a couple of short months at this point, both from the base camp side and the match side. So I think base camps, just to talk through that a little. I mean, listen, Argentina estimated 75 to 90,000 people in Qatar when they were there. So I'm not saying we're going to have that many people in Kansas City. I am saying it's their first game since winning it and lifting the trophy. The other two are within the region and drivable, and they're going to base camp here. I'm expecting a lot of Argentinians to show up. England travels very well. The Netherlands
Travels
very well. And so I think you're going to have not thousands, like tens upon tens of thousands of fans that are here on non-match days. And then when the games are here, I think that'll be a whole different ball game. And listen, I think we haven't even talked about the broadcast element of this. I mean, it's estimated the total viewership of this tournament will be somewhere between 4 and 5 billion viewers. And I think you've got some of these matches in Kansas City that if you can get larger viewer numbers than any Super Bowl, it's going to be, I mean, the goal is how do you leave this tournament and look back and say, wow, the impact on this was we're on the map globally. People know who Kansas City is. People want to go to Kansas City. They're known for soccer and sport. I mean, I think that's the impact that we can have. And we talk about Atlanta. I feel like Atlanta before the Olympics and Atlanta after. It's a very different city. And so how do we try to replicate that to the best of our ability? In
that same vein of growth, I mean, it's a difficult question to answer. I remember after 2014, a lot of these like youth soccer fields didn't really exist in town. I don't believe the Shields complex existed at that time. Compass obviously didn't exist at that time. United States has a nice run to the round of 16, and then all of a sudden you see youth soccer growing. Do you expect a growth in youth soccer? Obviously, you guys have the sporting youth program, all those things. Do you expect it to kind of trickle down from, hey, the World Cup's in Kansas City, and then we expect blank at the lower levels to grow as part of that?
100%. I think you'll see a pretty good bump in youth participation across the board, not just in Kansas City, but I think across the country. The key then is how do you keep them engaged, and more importantly, how do you develop them into guys that the next time the World Cup is here, that they're hopefully lacing them up and playing. But yeah, we expect a pretty good bump in participation.
Because that's always the $1 million question, at least that on my side, when 965, after every World Cup, it's like, how can the United States get better? And I'm always like, youth soccer is the answer. So I'm as a U.S. soccer fan, I'm hopeful that, hey, seeing these games at an Arrowhead or wherever can really bolster that, and maybe you find your own Lionel Messi in the youth program.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think that's been the biggest challenge. I think we have great youth participation, and then it trickles off as you get older, right, into the high school years. And listen, if LeBron James grew up and he was a attacking winger or a striker or a goalkeeper, that feels pretty good. So we got to get those guys to stay in the sport and kind of come up through the system.
What are your thoughts regarding the clear distinction between the success of the national women's team and, I'm not going to say lack of success, a moderate amount of success of the national men's team? Where is the equilibrium there, and where is the difference where the women's national soccer team is regarded as one of the greatest on the planet and the men are still sort of in the middle?
Yeah, I think it's a reflection. If you look globally, the women's sports scene it's not as far ahead outside of the U.S. as it is within the U.S. And I think even in the U.S. we feel like the boom has really happened in the last couple of years, but it's been a lot longer than that from a collegiate level, from a youth level. I mean, listen, I've been living in England for a couple of years. It's not nearly the same in terms of focus on it. And I think from a men's side of certainly soccer, that's it, right? When I went to Derby County, they were celebrating their 125th anniversary in 2010, right? I mean, so the history of the men's sport there is so deep. I think we have a head start on the women's side, and they've done a fantastic job. And I think it's on the men's side to, how do we, catch up with that? Because right now, when you think of the men's and women's national team in terms of who has been the dominant performer, the women are clearly out front.
What's the relation between MLS and the U.S. men's national team? Because I know I'm flashing back a little bit here. When Jurgen Klinsmann was the coach, I know it was a big friction point that he was pretty outspoken about not liking MLS players on the roster. Obviously, he was fired and a lot of things have changed. But just what is that relationship? Because MLS wants to grow a domestic league to look more like a Derby County or one like that. The U.S. men's national team obviously has a different goal in mind. What's that relationship right between the national team and MLS?
Yeah, I think it's very coach driven, right? So I mean, I think you got that point spot on. I think right now it's very good, and I think we've tried to have a continued relationship with the federation because listen, coaches are going to come and go. What you don't want to have is one coach comes in with a philosophy that's this, the next one swings it, and then you're kind of caught on this pendulum of like, who do we want to be? And so rather than coach driven, how do we be federation and league driven? And I think we're getting closer to that. And listen, I think there's probably a healthy balance of MLS players that are domestic that are on that team, as well as international domestic players that have left to go overseas. I think if you talk to Beasler and Zusi about their experience, I mean that was a lot of kind of MLS guys that were on that roster that were probably the top guys on their team. Versus now you have a lot of guys overseas that probably aren't the top guys on their team that are coming in, and so I think there's a philosophical difference there. But I think over time, listen, selfishly, I think the league as an MLS being more engaged and having more of a say in how we develop that. Because listen, we are developing the pipeline to U.S. Soccer doesn't have academy camps around the country. Every MLS team has a significant investment in youth development.
You mentioned Graham Zusi and Matt Beasler. When you guys were beginning the process of trying to attract FIFA here, they were in, if memory serves, they were still involved in their international career. Did you utilize the two of them?
Yeah, I don't know how much we utilize them in terms of engaging with the federation, but I mean, listen, that was the peak of their career from a national team standpoint, right? They were both in Brazil in 2014 on that roster and played a significant amount. Beasler would like to point out his photo where he stands over Ronaldo is probably the one he's got framed in his living room.
I think a lot of people have that one framed.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think they continued on, and I think they probably would have been on that 18 roster if we'd have qualified as well. And so, yeah, I mean, they were instrumental in, I think, just shining a spotlight on Kansas City, both from, at that point, top players in the league. We were a top performing team in the league, as well as really high performing national team players.
When FIFA came to town, and I can only imagine, maybe you can answer this, how many times they did come to town to check out the sites. Did they go to any sporting games?
We had, so the last big visit, I'll screw my dates, but I think it was October of 21 when they came in for kind of the final visit before the announcement in June of 22. We had a women's national team game at the stadium, I think against Japan, that they went to. So not a sporting game, got to see a women's game. So we at least able to showcase soccer in Kansas City and the energy around that. And they probably came in total. It's tricky to answer because it was during COVID, right? It was when it was really ramping up. So we had a lot of virtual stuff, but they probably had, that was the biggest visit in the kind of the finale, but they probably had a couple groups that came in a half dozen times outside of that.
You mentioned games. For a fan who's listening or I guess watching on the YouTube channel, who goes to a sporting match, they go to, your home openers, they go to your they go all your big sporting matches. You worked at Derby County. You've probably seen international soccer. What does the average fan need to know about the difference in going to, which is a great in-stadium experience with sporting, to see an MLS match versus, just pick a game that's going to be, let's take the quarterfinals out, pick a group play game that's going to be Arrowhead. What is the major difference in the fan experience?
Yeah, I mean, I try to describe European soccer as like a blend of the NFL in terms of the structure and the professionalism of it with the passion of college football is probably like the best analogy I could give to the casual fan. I think of those World Cup matches, I mean, it's like pick your biggest event you've ever been to and put it on steroids, right? You've got fans coming in. This is what they live for. every 4-year tournament. I mean, I think that's a big point, right? This isn't every year where you're like, all right, well, we can make the tournament next year. So I think the energy, the excitement, I mean, this is what those fans live for, will be through the roof. And so, listen, I would just tell everyone out there, pick a game and go to it. It doesn't matter if it's Argentina or 2 countries you haven't heard of. Yeah, go experience it. It'll be a spectacular event that you'll remember forever.
Last question, Jake, if I could. When you guys were pitching FIFA, what was the number one thing that you said about Kansas City to convince them to pick the smallest market bidding for the World Cup?
Yeah, I'd say less of a thing we said, more of the feeling we gave off, which was like the excitement and energy. And I'll give an example. We were on a lot of Zooms, right? And you have to think of the landscape. You've got the huge cities, New York's, LA's, they expect to get these things. They know they're going to get these things. Everyone knew New York and LA are going to get a World Cup game. So when you know it's happening, you kind of are going through the motions, right? We did not. I mean, we showed up every time and we were ready to go. And there was a Zoom I remember we were all on, and like 5 minutes in, they're like, hey guys, we get it. You're excited. We just got to get through the presentation. And so like that was the energy that we brought every time, was FIFA having to say, all right, guys, take it down a notch. And I think when you do that consistently,
you too excited?
Too excited, always. And I think when they came in for the visit, I would also say, like, we programmed the entire thing from the time they landed at the airport. This was the old airport, by the way, so not spectacular from and you know, if you're landing, I think they landed at 8:30. That terminal is not really busy. I sent the entire Sporting Kansas City staff to sit outside that terminal when FIFA landed and just act like it was busy. You know, we wanted energy. We had a route scripted to the hotel. Their hotel room was looking out over the "We Want the Cup" banner. When we walked to lunch in Power and Light the next day, we had kids and people playing soccer in parks. I mean, we had everything scripted to the T. To the point, listen, they probably were like, okay, we get it, guys.
Enough.
But like,
Enough.
But like,
They saw through the facade a little bit.
I think that matters when you're sitting in a room and you're trying to make a decision. You remember that. You remember these guys are obnoxious about wanting this thing. That, I think that's probably if I could pick one thing to break through, that was probably it.
Jake Reid, president of Sporting KC. Really appreciate your time. Thank you so much.
It was a blast, guys. Thank you.